grimly. The trip was one way. It had to be, considering the cost of getting over 6,000 colonists and supplies to such an out-of-the-way sector of the galaxy. Once they reached Pern, the fuel left in the great transport ships would be enough only to achieve and maintain a synchronous orbit above their destination, while people and cargo were shuttled down to the surface. To be sure, they had homing capsules that would reach the headquarters of the Federated Sentient Planets in a mere 5 years, but to a retired naval tactician like Paul Bendon, a fragile homing capsule did not offer much in the way of an effective backup. The Pern expedition was composed of committed and resourceful people who had chosen to eschew the high-tech societies of the Federated Sentient Planets. They expected to manage on their own. And though their destination in the Rookbot system was rich enough in ores and minerals to support an agriculturally based society, it was poor enough and far enough from the center of the galaxy that it should escape the greed of the technocrats. "Only a little while longer, Paul," Emily murmured, her voice reaching his ears alone, "and we'll both be able to lay down the weary load." He grinned up at her, knowing that it had been as difficult for her as it had been for him to escape the blandishments of technocrats who had not wished to lose two such charismatic war heroes, the admiral who had prevailed in the Cygni space battle, and the governor heroine of First Centauri. But no one could deny that the two were the ideal leaders for the Pern expedition. "Speaking of loads," she went on more loudly, "I'd better be there to referee my team now the reports are coming in. I suppose specialists have to consider their own disciplines the most important ones, but such contentiousness!" She stifled a groan, then grinned, her blue eyes twinkling in her rather homely face. "Just a few more days of talking and it'll be action stations, Admiral." She knew him well. He hated the interminable debate over minor points that seemed to obsess those in charge of the landing operation. He preferred to make quick decisions and implement them immediately instead of talking them to death. "You're more patient with your teams than I am," the Admiral said quietly. The last 2 months, as the 3 ships had decelerated into the Rookbot system, had been made tedious with meetings and discussions which seemed to Paul to be nitpicking over procedures that had been thoroughly thrashed out 17 years before in the planning stages of the venture. Most of the 2,900 colonists on the Yokohama had passed the entire journey in deep sleep. Personnel essential to the operation and maintenance of the 3 great ships had stood 5-year watches. Paul Bendon had elected to stand the first and last 5-year periods. Emily Bowl had been revived shortly before the rest of the environmental specialists, who had spent their time railing at the superficiality of the Exploration and Evaluation Corps report. She saw no point in reminding them of their enthusiasm for the same words when they had signed up for the Pern expedition. Paul continued to absorb the display information, eyes flicking from one screen to another, absently rubbing the thumb of his left hand across 3 fingers. Though not the sort of man Emily was attracted to, Paul Bendon was undeniably handsome, and Emily much preferred him with his hair grown out of the spaceman's crop that had been his trademark. She thought that the thick blonde mass softened the strong features, the blunt nose, the forceful jaw, and the wide, thin-lipped mouth, just then pulled slightly to the left in a little smile. The trip had done him good. He looked fit and well able to face the rigors of their next few months. Emily remembered how terribly thin he had been at the official ceremony commemorating his brilliant victory at Cygnus, where he and the Purple Sector Fleet had turned the tide of war against the Nazis. Legend said that he had remained awake and on duty for the entire 70 hours of the crucial battle. Emily believed it. She had done something of the sort herself during the height of the Nathis attack on her planet. There were many things a person could do if pushed, she knew from experience. She expected that one paid for such physical abuses later on in life, but Bendon, well into his 6th decade, looked vigorously healthy, and she certainly felt no diminution of her own energies. 14 years of deep sleep seemed to have cured the terrible fatigue that had been the inevitable result of her defense of First Centauri. And what a world!